Hello, everyone, and welcome to Women Excelling in Entrepreneurship. Thank you all for joining us today. We have an exciting panel lined up, and I just want to take a few moments to recognize our two sponsors for today's events. First, the Entrepreneurship Center at the Kenan Institute at the University of North Carolina. Our second sponsor, 100 Women, is on a mission to accelerate women leaders through the UNC Kenan Flagler MBA program. My name is Dr. Beth Struckell, the PhD kind of doctor, not the MD type. And I'm the co-founder of the 100 Women Movement and also a founding member of the Entrepreneurship Center's Leadership Council. So, ladies, when you think about your entrepreneurial journeys, many of you have shared bits and pieces of this already. What's one of the greatest challenges that you had to work through? And was it related to your being a woman or not?
I think one of the more difficult things that I've had to deal with actually was gender specific. I personally struggle with trying to find my leadership, and this is as an entrepreneur and not as an entrepreneur, my leadership style as a woman leader. I've had women bosses that were very, very harsh, maybe overcompensating, right? Didn't want to look weak. And I knew I didn't want to be like them. But then I'm naturally a little softer when it comes to things. And sometimes that can be seen as weakness. So I had always struggled with that as I kind of climbed the ladder. But as being an entrepreneur, I felt that the stakes were a lot higher. And so I definitely have had trouble with employees kind of being too comfortable, or the expectations of women bosses, I think, are different.
I've had to find my own voice in this journey. And that voice looks like being assertive, pushing myself to speak up during those times where it might be very uncomfortable. Because the reality is there have been many times when I've been in these all male rooms or been the only person of color, and I felt very small. But what I've realized is that through speaking up, speaking my truth, there are moments where it pushes the conversation forward, where it changes the decision, impacts the decision in a way that's going to make it better in the context I'm in now for the students and families I serve. So I will say it has taken time. It's taken me, really speaking my truth and seeing that the world didn't end. In fact, it got better, and just building my confidence that I deserve to have that seat. And quite frankly, if I'm not speaking up, then for the people I work in service to, I'm actually doing them a disservice.
My biggest challenges are all kind of in my head. So whether it is labeling myself as an academic and therefore not a creator. So it took me a while to realize that I could do well in school, but also create things. Or if it's just not wanting to dive into something, if I'm not sure that I'm going to be good at it. Just all these different, thoughts or barriers or challenges. Most of the times, the ones that are in my head are much stronger than anything that anybody can put in front of me. And I hear that to some extent with the other panelists. And as far as whether it has to do with being a woman, I mean, I definitely think that certain concepts, like imposter syndrome, I've heard is more prevalent in women. I think, men certainly have their own hangups and their own mental blocks, but there are just some mental challenges that are probably more prevalent in women just because of the society and the interactions that we have on a day-to-day basis that some of the other women have described.
We hear a lot as women that networks and our community is really important to our success. And some of you have talked a little bit about aspects of this. Can you discuss that with us a bit, just how important you see network and community in your success as entrepreneurs and women in business?
I agree. I definitely think that there's value in our friends and family and our village. But I cannot stress enough how important it is to have other entrepreneurs around you. Just because, as we've said several times throughout this, there's just a certain way our brains think, right? And there's certain risks that we're willing to take as entrepreneurs that someone who maybe is on more of a linear path and never put everything on the line to open up a business would think that we're crazy. And so it's not that their opinion isn't valuable, right? Because they still are looking at it from a different lens that may help us. but you got to surround yourself with other people that are just as crazy as we are, that are willing to put it all on the line to give you some feedback. And so I do have my village, but then I also have like my entrepreneurial village, and I have a women's CEO group that we started through an organization, and now we've just stuck with each other, and we meet once a month. We're accountable to each other. We make goals. I think that that is so important as well, because they may have faced the same challenges that you're about to face 3 months ago. They've already solved it, and now that's going to save you time. So I think that those resources are invaluable.
We keep hearing that in times of crises, there can be a really fertile ground for entrepreneurial startup activity. And yet we also have heard that over the last decade that there's been a decline in entrepreneurial activity. So can you give us your perspective on kind of the current climate for entrepreneurship, especially for women? And then somewhat related to this is the part two. Yesterday when we were getting to know each other, you all were mentioning, and we had a bit of a chat about the fact that, especially in this type of environment, it's really important but challenging to figure out how to balance the ability to be agile and pivot at the same time being laser focused. So I'm curious what other skills and competencies that this environment that we're dealing with today is requiring of you.
So I think the main thing to think about in this landscape is, how are you different? I love Phaedra's idea about the narrative, because that's usually what makes people different, telling your story, right? So I think that's awesome. But just keeping in mind, what makes you different than all of these other people that are inundating the same group of people that you're looking for? And I also think it's key to, as you're figuring out why you're different, who is your audience? You need to be really specific about who your niche audience is for whatever you're creating. And the answer is not everybody. It can help everybody, but that's not your niche group. You have to be, as you said, Beth, laser focused on where are you putting your energy? Are you actually getting to the audience that you need to get to, who's going to actually buy your product? Do they buy things online, or do they prefer to shop in person? Like, you just need to really understand why you're different, who your audience is, and make sure that you're building your product in a way that serves them, not just serves you, because we all think our ideas are cool, but what about our ideas does that audience think is cool? And that's what you're going to need to play up so that you can stand out.
This pandemic has led to quite an increase in entrepreneurship, whether that's, a side hustle or a full-time job shift into entrepreneurship. I've definitely noticed around midsummer and the second half of last year, a huge uptick in the number of people who were ready to either think of new ideas or pursue an idea that they've had for years and just hadn't taken the plunge on that. So it's an exciting time and place to be.
What advice would you all give some of the folks that are listening in today as aspiring entrepreneurs? What advice would you give them based on what you've learned?
My main advice would be to do what you love. And I know, as for authors, at least, they say, do what you know. And if what you know and what you love overlaps, then that is great. And that's hopefully everyone's future. But to the extent you find yourself doing, knowing a lot about an area, but you're just not that passionate about it, I wouldn't recommend putting all of your time and thoughts and effort into entrepreneurship in a path that you're not, really crazy about. Because as several of the women on the panel have alluded to, it's really hard work. But if you love it, then not only does that make the hard work easier, but it makes it totally worth it. So just do what you love. And if you need, time to figure that out, that is fine. As you've heard, we have all pivoted quite a bit in our careers on the path to what we love. So you're not expected to know that, at the outset, right after graduation.
I do know that COVID-19 has economically has disproportionately affected women. I think that the last statistic I had seen was about 900,000 jobs being lost by women compared to about 216,000 jobs lost by men. So what that shows to me is that we have a lot of work to do systemically. And thinking about, as women, pivot away from these careers due to things like layoffs, they're looking at entrepreneurship, many of them, as sort of a way out. So I think it's more important now than ever for us to tell you that we are here to support you, that there are support systems in place to help you if you need counsel, if you need advice, if you need resources. But indeed, you know, we all need to be hyper wary of this and watchful and see whatever we can do to advocate such that these kinds of disproportionate effects don't continue into the future.